In addition to its first airstrikes on the Islamic State inside Syria, the U.S. expanded its campaign against another jihadist group.
Last night, we also took strikes to disrupt plotting against the United States and our allies by seasoned al-Qaeda operatives who are known as the Khorasan Group.
The Khorasan Group? Intelligence officials say the Khorasan Group is an al-Qaeda cell based in Syria whose goal is to attack Western countries and targets. Earlier this month, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper said Khorasan may pose as much of a danger as the Islamic State in terms of threat to the homeland. U.S. officials say they focus on bomb plots and have been eyeing attacks on American airliners, prompting the U.S. to step up airline security over the summer, asking passengers boarding some U.S.-bound flights to turn on electronic devices, including cell phones, and not allowing them to board with devices that are out of battery power. Its leadership hails from the tribal areas of Pakistan. The Pentagon says Khorasan was using Syria as a safe haven and has been setting up training camps in Syria for fighters who hold Western passports. Officials say their intent is to train militants who can avoid security checks and slip into the U.S. or Europe to mount attacks. Muhsin al-Fadli is its top leader. He's believed to be in his 30s and is a senior al-Qaeda financier who the State Department says was among the few trusted al-Qaeda operatives who knew in advance about the 9/11 terrorist attacks. In 2012, the U.S. offered a $7 million reward for information leading to his capture. Mr. Fadli spent years living in Iran, where officials said he helped move money and operatives for al-Qaeda. How successful were the strikes against Khorasan? The U.S. fired Tomahawk cruise missiles at Khorasan targets, but the Pentagon says it's still assessing the impact of those.
So this morning we're learning about U.S. airstrikes that took place for the first time in Syria against not only ISIS but another extremist group called Khorasan, about which we know very little, save for the fact that according to the U.S. intelligence officials, they pose as significant a threat, if not more so, than the Islamic State. They are run by a former al-Qaeda operative, and officials have argued and warned that the group's expertise in making bombs, together with the fact that they are targeting jihadists already embedded in Syria with Western passports, makes them extremely dangerous and poses an extremely credible threat to Western targets.
Then there is this, buried in the press release from the military, a report that an imminent attack against the U.S. was thwarted in Syria overnight, according to U.S. officials. 8 airstrikes were conducted by the U.S. west of Aleppo against the terrorist group Khorasan, a network of seasoned al-Qaeda veterans.
And Khorasan, this group, Barbara, is one that I think a lot of Americans haven't heard much about. But this threat that we're now hearing more about here in the last week, how did this affect the timing of the strikes, if at all?
Well, Brianna, what we are hearing from a senior U.S. official is the reason they struck Khorasan right now is they had intelligence that the group of al-Qaeda veterans was in the stages of planning an attack against the U.S. homeland and or an attack against a target in Europe. And the information indicated that Khorasan was well on its way, perhaps in the final stages of planning that attack. So because they were hitting ISIS, they felt they could essentially surprise Khorasan. They knew the information that was there. They knew this was the time to do it, but everybody was focused on ISIS, so this was somewhat, they hoped, of a surprise to Khorasan. What did they hit? We are told they hit Khorasan training camps and explosives and munition production facility, command and control and communications facilities.
We started to see reports about Khorasan in the northern border region in Syria before these airstrikes started, and not knowing that it was already part of the plan of the airstrikes going in. The part that is alarming here is that they seem to be more targeted towards taking these Western fighters and sending them back.
This is what James Clapper, who's the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, had to say about this when they admitted it for the first time at Khorasan's existence on Thursday of last week, saying, quote, "In terms of a threat to the homeland, Khorasan may pose as much of a danger as the Islamic State."